Hello, welcome to another episode of Global Pause, Rethink the Future. So, in today's podcast, we're going to be looking at what we value, but in light of money, so the convention of money. So, when we're looking at the convention of money, we really are looking at the creation of it, how it gets created, and the way how it gets created, what happens when money is created in the manner that it is. What does it entail for our lives when we're beholden to the way how money is created? And if we're looking at a dynamic way of doing things, so engendering a dynamism within civilization, does that mean to say when you're looking at a threshold, kind of a cusp of different worlds, I presuppose, so a different way of doing things, so engendering a cultural kind of renaissance, you have to literally look at the convention of money in light of the potential for life, so therefore look at the way how money would be engendered in light of what we value. So I talked about in a prior episode, so to frame this, to give you an indication that, if we're looking at unmarketing life, and to unmarket life paradoxically substantiates a brand that becomes almost like the apotheosis of all branding, whereby if you consider what branding's about, it's about all these intangibles. It's about appropriating maybe intangibles for the good of your want, the relationality of want. We're looking at it, and because it substantiates an opportunity as defined by want, because business only makes sense as far as the opportunity that's presented as far as a niche or a market. If we're looking at an opportunity for life, then ultimately what we're doing is it transcends the market. It's unmarketing the opportunity towards life, so the way towards life that we presuppose, but that still necessitates, as far as the vestiges of our way that we're beholden to create a brand to a certain degree that becomes the custodian of the idea, so it cannot be usurped for the business rationale that's just given now. It requires as a defensive mechanism to ensure that it doesn't get usurped or hijacked. So as much as that it might be unmarketing, it still necessitates this. So very much in the same manner, when you're looking at, as one of the effects of potentializing your time beyond the economic good is the removal of money from moneyed relation, well, that ultimately necessitates re-looking at money, which I've talked about prior, but I'm going in this episode to do it in a little bit more detail. So when you're looking at that transition, you have to think, okay, well, the convention of money is this. This is what money is. So if we're looking at essentially habitualizing giving so that we have more reverence and gratitude towards life, what does that mean for the convention of money now? Okay, so this is the critical thing that you need to frame when you're looking at a liminal space that we're traversing from one way of life that presupposes the convention of money to another one that essentially that you're surpassing at. So what you have to do is that you have to think of money, but building into that conceptualizing of it, its redundancy. So if you consider, say, money now, money is never conceptualized with its redundancy built into it, because it just presupposes that it to be a given. And this is we're orientated towards a way of life where our want is primary because money is a given. We never question it. So if we're questioning money, but we're questioning money in light of the economic good that we maintain is the preeminent one that we're focusing on, then it forces us to look at money in a manner that does justice when we're throwing into relief or question the presupposition of that preeminent good. So this is what we're really going to be covering off today. So really what we need to look at is to understand money now and actually look at it. So what's happening, say, with Bitcoin as an example, is to see whether or not there's actually anything that's engendered outside the way how it's created that is not necessary, that does not engender anything that's not already kind of presupposed anyway. And I just believe that there's nothing within Bitcoin that animates a goodwill that money conceals, obviously. So when you're looking at the development of Bitcoin, there's no civilizational implication within its use. There's absolutely nothing. Okay, so this is really what we're going to be looking at. So, and one of the critical things that is the creation of money. Creation of money is created from the masters of the universe, so banksters that feel that they know what they're doing, that they're given the spigots. We're given over maybe a misplaced trust, really, to a degree. Maybe it's been usurped through the development of banking. And so, therefore, you have a class of people that arrogate to themselves unsurpassed knowledge as far as money goes. Right? But we have to look at it from the light of the way of life that's never questioned. Right? Because the framing of money, if you don't frame money in context to the way of life, so the way how that we're means towards the end, so it necessitates us securing a stock of time to secure ourselves from the claim that otherwise works on us, because we presuppose independence from that claim as our way towards life. So when you're looking at a common surpassing obviously throws into relief our understanding of the stock of time that we presuppose, just like it would then throw into relief the stock of money that is engendered through the creation of it. So outside, however it's created, and so this relates, doesn't matter whether or not it's Bitcoin or whether or not it's done through the stroke of a pen or through just the depositing of money in a bank account, and then looking at reserve ratios and how much that specific bank has to lend out. So I give $100 to a bank, the reserve ratio is 10. I park that $10 into my account at the Federal Reserve or the central bank, and I can lend out $90. I lend out $90, another person receives $90, they go deposit it in a bank. The bank there has to obviously put 10% against it, so if it's a reserve ratio, and then you have that leveraging up. This is the way our fractional banking works. The issue here is that, so it's created and then money circulates. Okay, and it circulates, and so it can accumulate. So the issue here is to connect the creation of money with what is of value. Okay, so when you're looking at if the preeminent good of time, if we presuppose, if we are beholden to an unavowed utopianism because the preeminent good of our time reigns is the ultimate good that we're focused on, which I've covered this off in all my episodes, that we're beholden to an unavowed utopianism because our time is an economic good, and the marginality or the threshold that we determine whether or not that economic good is leisure or whether or not it's labour is determined by us. So if there's no market outside you for your time, which obviously there isn't because it's your time, then there's no place for it, so it's utopian. So our way of life, we are beholden to an unavowed utopianism, and we are beholden to it in the sense that there's no outside to it because it's your time. So in that sense, everything that you are orientated towards, you make a supplement of. You're securing your time as a supplement, as an economic good, as an afterlife, as a Sabbath, as a retirement. It's just all the same thing. So the issue here is that when you are focused on the preeminent good of your time, you externalize or subordinate everything that you would presuppose that you actually value. The world, human relations, that's why if want is primary because money is a given, then the average relationality that you share with other people is defined by your wants. It's not defined by creativity because you accept the world as a given, because you accept the limitation of your agency or the creativity to create a life and not to be orientated towards life. You're orientated towards lifestyle. So if you're orientated towards lifestyle, you are not animating the full scope of your creativity because you accepted the world as a given. Why? Because want is primary because money is a given. So if money is a given, money is only a given in our way of life because we focus on the preeminent good of our time. It's what underwrites our wants. All right, you can only secure your wants if you have that underwriter, the credit towards it. All right, so the issue here is that linear understanding of our temporality puts into play kind of an understanding of the way how money gets created. It gets created, it circulates, and it accumulates. So if you're looking at, well, what if we're going to connect or integrate money's creation with what we value, then what we're doing is we're creating a dynamism within the production or the creation of money or credit. Let's say it's this credit, so it's not, so we're not conflating the two, because it's really not money. It's, like I said, it's liminal in the sense that it's traversing from one point to another, and it presupposes its redundancy. So how do you actually work in redundancy into money that's created when it's kind of tethered to what we value? Well, so we look at the exception that reigns, that is the exception to a way of life that's presupposed. So, I always talk about the way how a business would do this, but we're just looking at the way how people give and receive. So a person gives. Let's say we just remove which side of the excluded middle. So literally, the excluded middle that substantiates exchange through a differential of value, irrespective of which side you sit on. It doesn't matter. It's this giving and receiving. So we're going to abstract it out of context and just look at it from this aspect of giving and receiving. So here you have the scenario of a person who gives. Right? So they gives because we give so that we may receive. So what we're going to do is that we're going to look at it from that. So a person gives. So that giving of, say, their time, okay? So they are giving credit for it in inverted commas, all right? The credit here is because they have given. So what they've done, but through that giving, that creates that credit, all right? So here is the first point of departure from any understanding of what constitutes money, because money is pre-existent otherwise, is it not? So we work and we presuppose that we're going to get paid. It's not like the business that we get paid from creates money. It circulates, okay? So it's pre-existent. It's just there. The context of this person giving is that their act creates it. So it means to say that it's dynamic. So consider the nature of what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin is just, how does Bitcoin get created? It gets mined, all right? So my understanding of it, maybe there's all the other kind of different kind of cryptos are different in their way, but it's just a computer that goes through these equations and so spits out fractions of a Bitcoin depending on how many calculations they can do. So it's basically the way how the thing gets created is through action, all right? But in the context of what we're talking about, it's absolutely useless. Like, what is it connected to? Right? It's connected to nothing. Literally, what is the value of these machines running all these calculations? Nothing. All right, but what happens after it gets produced? Well, it gets circulated, doesn't it? So if it can circulate, it can accumulate. So the way how Bitcoin, you think that there's something different about Bitcoin? It might be outside the domain of the central banking system, but it very much models in exactly the same way. Is what the only difference is the way how the money gets created, right? But once it gets created, it circulates like any other form of money. And if it gets lost, like, I don't know, a person loses their hard drive, I mean, in that context. But basically it circulates and it accumulates. And it'll only up to a point once the whole thing, the whole stock of money is being mined, then that's it. Okay, that's that. But it still means to say that it circulates and it accumulates. So when you're looking at, so there's nothing that's different from basically the way how money is given now. If because once it goes into circulation, it's pre-existent to basically your activity. Yes, of course it is. It has to be in order for it to be used. So when you're looking at the way how you're engendering money, the creation of money by tethering it to the value of what you do, that's a first point of departure, because what it is, it's dynamic in the sense of its creation. Because if we're all orientated towards the preeminent good of our time, and yet we presuppose the convention of money, which is that money conceals goodwill, well, on your own individual timeline, you have to kind of like engender the goodwill that you receive as much as it's goodwill in the sense that it's collective, but your understanding of it, of that goodwill, will be through your own actions. And this is the whole point about it. This is how it potentializes, it keeps on potentializing your time beyond the economic good the more that you do it. And this is what I need to kind of demonstrate when you're looking at surpassing the use of money or understanding it like as such. So it's dynamic in the sense of it's created. So here you have, so it doesn't circulate, okay, all right? It doesn't circulate. It gets annulled, all right? So it exists. So I'm not going to talk about like value. It's just the value here is what you've done. So we don't have to put a monetary value in inverted commas. We're just talking abstract in the sense that you do something, you give of your time in the dynamic way that you do, and that creates a credit. But that credit gets annulled, all right? Now, how does it get annulled? Well, it gets annulled because what's put into play is basically for you to receive acts where it gets annulled. So nothing remains of what you did prior, because the value here is equated with what another person gives as well. So the giving and giving. So you gave in order to receive a credit, and then at a later date, this person also gave, all right, but to you in the context of annulling what that credit that would otherwise circulate. So what you're doing is that you are stopping out the ability of what is created to circulate and if it doesn't circulate, it doesn't accumulate, because through potentializing these other acts that kind of come afterwards through the annulling of the otherwise it's circulating, no accumulation can occur. But the thing here is that so what happens is that so the act of creation and then the annulling is a way of short circuiting. But beyond that, what's occurring when that, and I touched upon this on a prior episode about credit, all right? Because beyond that is the gratitude or the trust or the faith that you have beyond basically the act that you are subjected to of its annulment. So let's look at what do I mean when I say that. So if you think that you're beholden, you are giving because you're part of an ecosystem or a culture, okay, where the culture is orientated towards the indivisibility of your temporality, about removing the marginality of the way that we are orientated towards life. All right, so potentializing your time beyond the economic good for a common surpassing. All right, that's in a nutshell. That's what the culture that you are orientated towards. So you literally are potentializing a way towards life. So that culture that you are engaged in when you are giving has the context of that culture that you are part of. So when you receive through the annulment, as it were, of at a later date, that substantiates a faith or a trust in the way how this thing works, because it creates a circuit in the annulment, but what surpasses it, what goes beyond basically what is a greater good beyond the annulment, is essentially the goodwill that is animated within your own timeline, as it were. Okay, this is what I talked about just prior, because through the iteration of these acts, what you're doing is that you're engendering a goodwill that otherwise money conceals the use of it, because you cannot, if you have secured credit in order to go buy something, and I always talk about it, you can never be as grateful for it, because if you have secured the credit in order to go buy something. Here in the context here, you might have done an act given at a later state to receive at a later state, but you can't be given credit for what you did prior, because you are part of a culture that engenders that is beyond you. I always say it's always beyond the act that you do. So what it's doing is just demonstrating that dynamism that we talked about, that otherwise you would never be subjected to or experience, because you presuppose always securing credit towards life. So the credit towards life that you would otherwise maybe appropriate for yourself, you are giving credit to the culture that you are part of. Now that culture that you are a part of is literally the way how that you're engendering a goodwill beyond the use of money, money's concealment, or goodwill's concealment through the use of money. So when you're looking at the threshold between different ways of doing things, And so the way how money gets engendered for it to circulate, the circulation of money here is important, because if money circulates, money circulation conceals goodwill, does it not? So how can you basically get goodwill to circulate if money's circulating? It doesn't work like that, does it? You have to literally have money cannot circulate in order for the goodwill to circulate. So it has to be annulled. But the annulment is the only way that goodwill can circulate, because if money circulates, then no goodwill. You look, and that's the dynamism within the culture. That's what allows possibility, because all goodwill is that, well, what else can we do? What goodwill means, let's do this. Because if you're opening up goodwill, then what you're doing is you're sharing in a common surpassing, where the possibility towards the way how people work towards what they are orientated towards means to say that you're removing the limitation that you otherwise have to work with, because you are appropriating credit towards something, whereby if you are sharing, you're removing the rivalrous dynamic that is otherwise a given of our way of life, because you literally are giving credit to the culture that is a common surpassing towards life. So that dynamism is only engendered through the way how money does not circulate, through its annulment. And so if you're annulling the circulation of money, then ultimately it cannot accumulate in a stock of time or as a supplement in order to secure life as independent from the they. You're potentializing a common surpassing with the they. And so I always frame it as you're democratizing creativity. Because when the world is a given, a want is primary because money is a given. The world is a given, all right? The world is a given. Why is it a given? Because you don't animate the full scope of your creativity. So I just thought that maybe when you're looking at understanding the way how conceptualizing money is important, because it presupposes a kind of a architecture that would enable this dynamic way how money gets engendered and then it gets annulled. And ultimately, you've got a context here is that the way how the credit is given is individualized, because it's very much determined on what a person gives, getting back to the value that person has. So if you're looking at how can we give credit to a person whose position now in the world is something that we would never give credit for. So let's say a person that builds nuclear weapons, a scientist that's sole focus is on the destruction or the creation of everything that's antithetical towards life. How could you implicate what they do and what they give where they can get credit for that? This is the issue. And you only have to think of all the different things that we put up with, that we accept because we're orientated to the way towards life, where we're not giving due regard to what we value. Now, if you start to give due regard to what you value through your giving, and you're giving credit through that, through the dynamic nature of the way how that credit is engendered for it to be annulled, for goodwill to be animated, then all these kind of things that we accept that just absolutely abhorrent, we wouldn't accept it, because there'd be no person would be in a position to ever get credit for what they do when it's so abhorrent or so repulsive to basically what we value as people. Right? So this is the way, and this is the only thing, the only way that you can do that is by looking at the way towards life and questioning our way in light of what we presuppose. Anyway, I just thought it's just another way of looking at what I'm talking about, but crystallizing it down more into the framing money from what we presuppose with our way of life and the way how we can potentialize. Because all you're doing, like I said, you're potentializing giving. So the whole point about it is, why would money be surpassed in this context? Well, if money doesn't circulate, like I said, then goodwill is animated. So if it never gets circulated, then all you're doing is potentializing that goodwill more and more and more. What does that mean? It just means people are more likely to give, because you're giving credit to the culture that actually is the security that supports, that nurtures you, and not a power removed that likes to say that, look, we're doing this for you because it's in your vested, it's in your interest. We're securing life. Okay, see the bad, the boogeyman over here, the shadow here, the puppet master here that's going to say that this is evil. This is the way how power works in order to substantiate, basically. So if you don't animate the creativity that is within you, then obviously that power is outside of you, and then it's going to try to substantiate itself through any means necessary. And any means to say means you. It's you. It works through you because you don't animate the creativity that's left fallow because you accept the world as a given. And this is essentially what we're dealing with now. Anyway, until next time, take care.